Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is a presentation put on to you for the actual coalition, Veteran Coalition out here in the RGV area. I'm going to be covering today is pretty much just the JIVs, the Justice Involved challenges and solutions for these actual veterans that are going through some of the Justice Involved programs that are out here within Texas and several countries and whatnot. Know that I'm going to start out at a 10,000 foot view and narrowing it down to how it impacts you as an advocate, you as a participant in our community, in our veteran community. So this pretty much explores the complexities around the JIVs and focusing on the challenges that they face and some of the solutions that we as a group might be able to come about and help these guys reintegrate into the civilian sector. So I'll be covering, like I said, the overview of the Justice Involved veterans, some of the challenges they face, policy and advocacy that is out there. And then I'll go through and give you guys an input as to what a success story should look like. And then we'll dive into some actual case studies that are out there. So Justice Involved. I know just a couple of weeks ago, the last coalition meeting we had Mr. Clifford Lovejoy, who came out to one of our coalition meetings, and he presented his initiative that he wanted to do with court veterans that are or veterans that are going through the judicial system in the courts. He's from Hidalgo County. He wants to expand this throughout, but obviously he wants to focus on one area first. So understanding the justice involved system is crucial to addressing the actual issues that they face. Now, this section will provide a comprehensive overview, including the definitions, some of the statistics, and some of the common reasons for their involvement within the criminal justice system. So, um, the definition and scope. So, justice involved veteran are individuals who basically served the military. They were honorably discharged, dishonorably discharged, other than honorable, whatever discharge they have, they served the military, and they subsequently come into contact with the criminal justice system. Now, this includes those who are incarcerated or on probation or facing legal issues due to various circumstances tied to their actual military service. So some of the numerous studies that are out there indicate a significant proportion of veterans encounter legal issues after their service, post-service. So understanding some of these demographics, such as age, race, service history, helps tailor, hopefully, their interventions aimed to this particular population, underserved population that we have within our veteran community. So you can see that 74% of the incarcerated veteran men received an honorable discharge. So that means the majority of them did what they said it was supposed to do. They honored their contract. They were in their best behavior and whatnot, right? However, there's a difference there. 27% of incarcerated veteran men have combat experience. Now, when I first read this actual statistic, I was like, well, why is that? Why is it that only 27% have combat experience and the majority of these, veterans have no combat experience, yet they're, involved within the justice system? Well, it goes to show that regardless of whether you served for one day, a month, a year, or whatnot, if you were impacted, if you were indoctrinated into an actual militant mindset, a militant community, such as one of our armed forces, then that could be probably enough to have you struggle or have people struggle in transitioning back into that. Now, for those people who have served, their entire career, 10, 20, 15, 20 years, then it's actually a little bit more prolonged for them to be able to transition back into the civilian sector. So the average age of these incarcerated men is about 52 years old versus 38 years old for incarcerated non-veteran men. So we're seeing a somewhat of a latent effect for these veterans. If you have ever taken the military culture training that Anthony provides, you will be able to almost understand as to why there's a sleeper effect or a latent effect, right, for some of these veterans who start showing the need for assistance or help reintegrating back at later on in their age. So, and then the other statistic that actually hits home, considering our population, incarcerated veteran men are less likely to be white. So the number one race that is out there that incarcerated veterans are Hispanics and blacks. So very minimal Asians, and then of course we have some white that are in there. So um, some of the statistics that we don't cover and hardly anyone tracks, unfortunately, is that some of these veterans that are already in jail or going through court or are on probation, they're within the justice system, but they're not part of the JIV program, Justice Involved Veterans Program. So that means that one, they didn't get the message, they didn't know that this help is out there, and so it's a very underserved population out there. So veterans within the GIV program who are not properly treated, basically they have a hard time basically just going through and rehabilitating and transitioning back into that. Now another statistic that is not covered is that there's a repeat offender veterans who have completed GIV, have gone through and then they get into trouble again. So that brings up the question, well, why are they getting in trouble again? Did they not get fully rehabilitated? What was the motive behind this? Is a similar behavior manifesting? So just some of the things that are not being tracked out there within the actual programs that are there. Justice involved veterans may experience a range of issues leading to their involvement within the criminal justice system, including some of their mental health problems, substance abuse and disorders, which is actually still mental health, and in difficulties transitioning. So notice I started pretty much from the middle down to the bottom to the end. So all these kind of intertwine. The majority of the people are veterans struggling to transition, already experiencing mental health issues or substance abuse disorders. And I'll be able to cover that in detail as to how they got there into this destructive path. Um, so this next section will dive into the primary challenges that justice involved veterans encounter as they navigate their legal issues and attempt to reintegrate into society. So some of the challenges out there, significant challenges in reintegrating to civilian life include the unemployment. They become unemployment. They can't really adapt to a new job, or they don't know how to transition and apply their military training into the civilian sector. And then, of course, with that, comes social isolation and difficulty, accessing veteran-specific resources. And what I mean by veteran, most of these guys have a difficulty understanding that there's other resources besides the Veterans Affairs, the VA, and so they kind of isolate and they don't reach out for this. So therefore, accessing some of these veteran resources, such as providers like yourself, that are within this room right now, and then extend out within our coalition. A lot of these veterans don't know that it's out there, or some that do know that are out there, they just choose not to get that. Why? Well, because they're struggling with mental health issues. Now, many veterans suffer from these health conditions, mental health conditions such as PTSD, depression, anxiety. Heck, I think everyone in this room has probably experienced a little bit of depression and anxiety. Who am I kidding, right? But these issues can lead to maladaptive behaviors, right? And criminal involvement, making access to appropriate mental health care essential. So, appropriate mental health. So, just because we're getting mental health, it doesn't mean that it's appropriate fitting for the veteran. And I understand how the mental health community works. A pain is pain, suffering is suffering, but nonetheless, we have to understand that it's building that rapport with the actual veteran that becomes the challenge many times. Now, the U.S. Comptroller created a general study, found that 81% of the incarcerated veterans interviewed had not been advised about their eligibility for benefits. Heck, the majority of them, or half of them, believe that they had lost their military veterans benefits that are out there, or the VA benefits. Now there are some benefits that are still available to these veterans after they are arrested or convicted, right, or they're serving time. And then there's others that are completely taken away, or there's others that are reduced to a certain percentage or whatnot. Nonetheless, I want you to know that all my data and information here comes from about 5 years of research, 10 years, or actually since 2006, that I've been helping the veteran community, been involved with the veteran community in numerous areas. So the information I'm presenting are mainly from peer-reviewed journals, especially here dated within the last 5 years. So, so scaling it down, give you guys the big picture. Now we're scaling it down to the Raymondville prison, managed by MTC or MCT, either one. So this visit happened about 3 weeks ago. Anthony and I went out there, and we had this idea that we are going to go out there and conduct a peer group session and whatnot, and open up to the floor for discussion, kind of establish the rapport of humane. But we actually found that about 35 to 40 of these veterans that showed up, man, they were eager just to talk, just to hear us, be there, see us be there, and hear us, say what it is we needed to share with them, as far as their military veterans, their understanding their struggles, their challenges, their individual challenges, which now hits home is not just a statistic reading it on a paper, it's actually, word of mouth. So some of these challenges, again, were the unemployment. Some of them were actual veterans that had transitioned from the military, struggle challenges of unemployment, like I said before, social isolation issues. Now, think about it. Now they're not only distraught mental veterans, now they had another label, and they are convicted felons to make things worse for them to help, reintegrate. So we did find that there's limited community out there within this particular um, community of veterans that are incarcerated at the Raymondville visit, during the Raymondville visit. So 60% of these veterans were actually repeat offenders. A couple of them have actually gone through veteran court. And I remember Anthony, just waiting to ask, well, why the heck are you here then if you went through veteran court? Well, it just goes to show is like, hey, yeah, you completed veterans court. Good for you. Awesome, but are you truly rehabilitated? And of course, if we're going back to similar destructive behaviors, then the answer is no. The program wasn't effective for this particular individual. Now, I'm not saying that it would be the same for every veteran that is out there. That's why veteran core program should be tailored to each and every single individual depending on their needs. So the prison staff, after we interviewed spent about an hour with the actual veterans out there, we interviewed the staff, and we learned that about 75% of all incarcerated veterans are actually seeking mental health services. Now, this is through the actual prison, through the state, is not through the VA, even though they're still entitled to receiving VA medical benefits for the most part, depending on their disability rating, right? And then the other 25% of veterans that just decline mental health services at all within this particular state jail. So when we as the advocates asked the veterans how many of them had a positive, healthy support system when they are released, which is, I think, a very important thing. If you're gonna be transitioning back into the civilian sector and you have a pretty crappy support system or home environment, then more than likely is you're gonna find yourself back within the criminal justice system. So only about 10% identified as having such. So now you're starting to see the picture as to why this population truly is underserved. So when Anthony and I asked what are some of the biggest challenges while incarcerated, the veterans expressed their inability to communicate with community resource partners. Well, duh, they don't have access to the internet. They don't have access to their cell phones. They don't have access to telephones or anything like that. They have access to a prison-controlled communication system that you have to build an account. Some of the writing gets vetted, the emails and whatnot gets screened, but nonetheless, that became an issue because they can't really, communicate and call up a community partner, say, hey, I'm going to be getting out of jail soon. I'm going to need housing or I'm going to need help with my claim. So, in essence, they're having a hard time sometimes even obtaining just their regular documents, such as their DD 214s or providing release of information or obtaining, updating their address so that they can get their VA benefit letters and find out exactly where they're at. So, another challenge that we faced as advocates is that Anthony had actually gone through and provided information, documents, or handheld resources to the prison staff. And we understand that it's a process. It's not like, hey, here you go, pass it on. It has to be vetted, it has to be approved, it has to be screened, and then it makes it through. Well, we found out that this went into a black hole, maybe. And so the actual hard copies never made it to the veterans, so that's kind of what we started realizing that this particular visit wasn't exactly what we were thinking of, that it was going to take a different path. Now, the support programs are vital for aiding the justice of all veterans and veterans in general. I mean, shoot, it's not just the justice of all veterans in need these type of programs in overcoming their challenges and facilitating successful integration. It's all veterans, right? So some of the programs that are out there, the veteran treatment courts, these pretty much are specialized court systems designed to address the unique needs of veterans involved within the actual criminal justice system. Now, there is some criteria as to what qualifies a veteran to be able to receive these services or not. I won't get into the weeds. Remember, this is a very high profile presentation. Nonetheless, they do focus on rehabilitation rather than punishment, providing a supportive environment. Now, understand that there's quite a view of um, veteran treatment courts out there, VTCs out there within the country. I think there's over 500. Some here within our neighboring counties, they don't have veteran treatment courts, right? So this is not a systemic thing. A lot of these programs are funded, which I'll get into this a little bit, are funded by the federal government and are managed by other NGOs or other non-government offices or government agencies as well. So it's not systemic. There's several organizations such as All Rise that is out there trying to incorporate some of the best practices and training and just standardizing some of this. So it's still, even though we've been knowing since World War I that veterans come home with issues, it still hasn't, the treatment and the transition system still hasn't caught up. So think about it like this. You know, when people are in the military, they go through 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks of military training indoctrination. And so you have a militant mindset now. Forget everything else that you were taught or you were raised with. No, you have a militant mindset, right? And then let's say that you serve 4 years. So you have 4 years of being integrated within a military community where you have a support system, you have housing, you have birthing, or housing and birthing is the same thing. You have the cafeteria or whatnot on base. You have different resources, family support systems within the actual organization. And when you come to discharge, they only give you 2 weeks. 2 weeks of transition assistance program where they expect you to just dump everything you learned from boot camp onto that period in time before being discharged. Hence, why some of these people have issues transitioning into the civilian sector. So, the supportive environment, I have learned that sometimes the supportive environment is there to push compliance instead of veteran commitment, which is, becomes a challenge and a very understandable challenge. Nonetheless, some of the studies that were out there that I researched and analyzed, that was the findings that they were reporting as well. So, some of the mental health services or access to mental health services for veteran is crucial. So mind you, it says for veteran, doesn't just say for veterans who are incarcerated. So mental health services for veterans are crucial, right? So these programs are aimed to providing counseling and therapy, which can help address some of the underlying issues that contribute to criminal behavior. So, do they receive mental health services? Well, it depends. It depends on who you talk to. It depends on the type of veteran, if the veteran's involved, if the veteran's committed, or the veteran's just compliant and just going through the motions. And it also depends on the dedication of the service provider, believe it or not. There seems to be a little bit of burnout out there, not quite a bit. I'll show you here in a minute what I'm talking about within our community. But nonetheless, it's not standardized. It's not, the benefits are not always the same for each benefit. So it fluctuates and it varies, right? So substance abuse treatment programs are available as well. These are pretty much tailored for veterans, which can be effective in addressing addiction issues. Now, some of these addiction behaviors become a coping mechanism for these particular veterans that are having a hard time struggling, transitioning, or integrating themselves into their families or even into the work sector, right? So the substance abuse program is designed specifically for veterans to address their unique challenges and needs effectively. Well, it's not always true. We know that we are flawed as human beings, right? We are trying our best sometimes, but then we have to really look at this from the veteran perspective. Are some of these programs available? Yes, they're available, but sometimes there's just a wait time of over a year, 6 months, 9 months, however it might be. It might not be an urgent issue, an urgent need that's addressed, but nonetheless, it's there. And this is pretty evident by the suicides that we just had at the VA facilities. There was one in El Paso, one in San Antonio, and then the one we just had here recently in the McAllen area. Oh, was I not supposed to say that? But yeah, it was. It happens. It happens. Why? Well, because it's there, but it's not really there. It's there, but not everyone knows how it works. It's there, but we have to understand that by the time the veteran says, "Hey, I need help," man, first of all, it takes a lot for a veteran to say, "Hey, I need help." But once they get there, it's like urgent, if not emergency. Why? Because we wait for the very last minute because we're really good liars and saying, oh, yeah, I'm doing fine. Oh, I'm doing good. And we put up this beautiful face and persona and we're go getters and we're successful in our jobs, in our communities and sort of. But nonetheless, it's like, hey, there's still something there tugging inside of us. And we wait to the very last minute to say, I need help. So, addressing some of these challenges faced by the JIVs, just involved veterans, also requires an active policy and development and, of course, advocacy. So, the section I'm about to jump into discusses some of the legislative initiatives, very high profile. I'm not going to get into the weeds, and the role of advocacy organizations, which are you in the audience. So the legislative initiatives, like I said, we've been knowing since World War I that veterans were having issues, right? So some of the veteran treatment courts are out there. There's funding for mental health services, but then there's very little accountability except for the comptroller, maybe another OIG, Office of Inspector General, or GAO, General Accountability Office, that goes through and actually evaluates these or truly evaluates these organizations, not just are we meeting our metrics. And that's where the gap exists between fulfilling the metric because that's what the grant requires, and or looking at the true rehabilitation of a veteran. So some of these legislative initiatives are improving for treatment of these JIVs, such as including some of the laws that are out there, and they promote the establishments of veterans and treatment courts. But nonetheless, like I said, it's not everyone knows about this. Heck, not even attorneys within our own that serve our county of Cameron County know that this out there, that this exists out there for veterans. Mind you, there might be another motive as to why these attorneys are not truly helping or promoting veteran courts, is because, well, shoot, they get more money that way. If you transfer to a JIV program, yeah, there might still be some fees, but not as much as if there was an actual trial and defense and everything else, right? So, again, effectiveness versus metric driven. I want you to keep that in mind. How effective are we actually being within our community for these veterans who are underserved? So some of this legislative initiative, like I said, has been happening since World War I. There was a pilot program that got initiated, several different veteran support acts that have been modified throughout, several different House rules and the Senate rules and whatnot. So there's about 500 counties within the U.S. that have these programs funded, right? It's like I said, they're not all the same. They're not all systemic. Heck, they're not even all the same within the same state. They don't operate within the same parameters as they would within the same state. So, but listen to this. They are created to facilitate access to services at their earliest point possible, earliest point, but not when when they're arrested, already in jail, already it's a little too late. That's not the earliest point possible, and I'll be able to share and identify exactly when that earliest point possible is, so we can start being reactive and become a little bit more proactive, or even maybe even preventative. So by addressing the root causes of veteran involved criminal justice, the act contributes to improve public safety. So this is a continuous loop of improvement, right? It's a practice. We get it, but nonetheless, that's why people like you are important within our community. Here in Texas, this program is ran by the Texas Veteran Commission. There's different chapters, different state bills out there that actually govern or have the criteria or hold the grants or award the grants for the non-government agencies or even some of the government agencies that are out there within our community. So, numerous advocacy organizations, they pretty much work tirelessly to support justice involved veterans, raising awareness, which is this is what we're doing, right? And pushing for policies changes that enhance treatment and the reintegration opportunities, right? If we're sitting in a court panel and we're saying, oh, this, what we're doing is great, it's fine, then you maybe have become complacent because it's not all there, and we have to keep in mind that the interest is of the veterans is not your job, is not your position, is not meeting the criteria. It's not only that. The main focus here are veterans being able to reintegrate safely and healthy and successfully into the actual veteran or the actual community. So it's raising awareness, policy change, right, and including some of these non-government organizations such as yourselves to bring this awareness, this support for this justice-involved veterans. So there is collaboration, thank God, between the VA, different agents or different departments within the VA, right? The VA healthcare, there's different departments out there. The VA is not just one encompassing organization. There's different organizations that collaborate between themselves and the actual criminal justice system. So it is essential for them developing comprehensive solutions to meet the needs of these JIVs, these justice involved veterans. So it's their needs. It's not meeting the organizational need, which is meeting the criteria of the grant. It's the veterans' need. So we have to be able to look at this in a holistic approach. We have to be able to establish some of that rapport, some of that trust, and establish some of those relationships with these veterans, so that we can ensure the actual success, and have them, come up and share their testimonies later on, and possibly impacting and motivating other veterans to follow a path similar, if not something better, that they might encounter. So, going into this section pretty much highlights inspiring stories and effective programs that demonstrate a possible positive outcomes for these justice involved veterans through targeted support and rehabilitation efforts. So, I'm really grateful to say that it is out there. It's not perfect. It needs lots of room for improvement, if we're really realistic here. But some of the personal testimonies from the Justice of All Veterans can provide insightful insights into their experiences and the transformative impact of the support program on their lives. So, only a small number of these veterans that have gone through the program are willing to share their unique experiences. So I did a little bit of digging. I was like, well, why? If these veterans are successful, they should be proud of what they accomplished, right? Well, why is it? What's holding them back from sharing their success stories? We all know that veterans love to brag. We all know that veterans, are one-uppers, but why was there just a very small amount of information out there? Well, some of the studies show that JIV court participants, this is not the ones that are already in the justice system or in the prison system. These are VTCs, Veteran Treatment Court veterans, right? The success was captured as finishing the program to avoid incarceration, not reintegration into the community. So they wanted to, their success was motivated. Hey, I'll be compliant as well. You want me to jump? You tell me how high and when and for how long, right? But it wasn't really, the study showed that it wasn't really the veterans' involvement or the veterans' commitment, more so the staff's commitment to be able to understand, hey, this is the veterans' needs, and that is what we're here to do, right? Leave no veteran behind. No veteran behind. That is the motto of this personal BTC, right? So it's not perfect, but the effectiveness is there. It's supposed to, the way it's supposed to help work on paper sometimes is accurate, sometimes it is not. Some of the reports mainly capture the quantity of JIV members who have participated or completed the program. So if you look up Cameron County, Hidalgo County, you look at the VTC reports that are provided by the courts, you'll notice that however many members were enrolled, however many members fell out, however many members are within the program or have graduated, right? But we say leave no veteran behind. So essentially, we should not even have a metric that says, hey, this veteran didn't complete. No, 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 no. If we're truly dedicated to doing this, right, and the goal is reintegration of veterans, right, then we should leave no veteran behind. Other than we should just change our slogan here, right? Our motivational model, right? So evaluating the effectiveness of the rehabilitation program is crucial to understanding what works for these JIVs, for the justice involved veterans. So the success rates in case studies show positive change that can occur, right? So we all know that there's long-term impacts on this. So there's very little information out there as to how we are assessing the long-term impact of support of these rehabilitation initiatives on these GIVs, the Justice Involved Veterans. We all know that these long-term impact and support pretty much help shape the future programs and policies to sustain success and reintegration of the particular veterans. So shaping the future policies, this is where you come about as an advocate. Whether you're in the court panel or not, you still have an influence, you still have an impact on a veteran's life. Man, challenge the status quo. Do what is right, not what is supposed to be real, not what it's supposed to look like. Do what is right. Get out of the comfort zone, and there's veterans out there, leave no veteran behind. There's veterans out there that have been left behind. So that should be, a motivator within itself, right? So the other thing that I noticed within these studies and my analysis was there was no actual true follow-up after these guys had completed the program to see how they were doing, to actual a metric to measure their quality of reintegration, not just, hey, you finished, boom, you're out the door, via con Dios. But nonetheless, there are very good, successful stories, very good NGOs, non-government organizations that came about from veterans that have completed or gone through the program, that they want to better the system or they want to better the program for the actual veterans that are out there. So there's been a lot of good motivation behind this, a lot of good thrust, momentum to keep this program going forward. So these next couple of slides, I want to warn you. I mean, I'm about to about 29 minutes into the presentation. It's a little bit longer than what I originally intended, but this is real versus right. So I'm going to give you a disclaimer. Some of these, or actually, all these case studies are real. The information shared might actually upset you, so I'm giving you a fair warning. There's nothing out there that is graphic or anything like that. It's just very real information that I want to share with you. So since 2006, I've been reaching out to veterans who have ended up either in a hardship or destructive environment, right? So I noticed that, like I said, we transitioned from being military and we become candidates for separation from the military, and then we start experiencing some of those hardships, right? Which ultimately sometimes end to destruction. So those destructive paths, which can be, suicide. There was 22 suicides per day back a couple of years ago. Mental health manifestations such as substance abuse, domestic abuse, and so on and so forth, right? So some of those behaviors are pretty much destructive by that point, right? So um, while I was stationed in Washington, D.C., within the federal government, was running a nonprofit and it was nationwide. I ended up tag teaming with the Wounded Warrior Project. We just didn't see eye to eye. It was during the time when they were having a huge scandal as to how they were managing their finances, or should I say, mismanaging their finances. But nonetheless, Christopher Cooper was the grandson of one of my coworkers, and I got an award. And I don't do this to get awards. I don't do this to get recognition or pats in the back. You know, my motive is way different than receiving accolades or recognition. But Christopher Cooper had been recently received or released from a psych ward after being detained. So the cops took him over to a psych ward. Thank God they didn't take him to jail. They did the right thing. He started out good, right? And this is in Oklahoma. He was a truck driver in Afghanistan. He did about 144 trips until he didn't anymore. His convoy was ambushed. So later on, after his release from the psych ward that day, which was the morning of July 4th, he got killed at a truck stop in Oklahoma. So some of the um, labels he was given was that he was crazy, drug user, junkie. But then again, he was always clean because CFR 49, the Department of Transportation requires him to do your analysis, right? He was always clean. Now, he was divorced. He was homeless from time to time. He was scary looking, angry. There was no JIV program involvement, but there was police involvement. Now, I remember telling his grandmother, my coworker, saying, Michelle, I think it's a little too late for Christopher. He needs way more advanced help than what my system, my organization can give him. And I was like, I fear that this is going to end badly. So I said that 2 months before July 4th. And on July 4th, I got a phone call and said, hey, you were right. You were right about Chris. You were right about Christopher. He was killed this weekend. He was killed this morning. And so that is some of the burden that I carry, that I wasn't able to help this veteran within their time of crisis, their time of need. This other particular individual was also from Oklahoma, Mr. Devin Rogers. It took me about 19 months to be able to establish rapport and a relationship with this individual. So he pretty much held up an office building in South Oklahoma City metro area. He didn't have any other involvement with the police or anything like that. When he got arrested, he rejected all help from the VA. He rejected all help from any JIV program, from any other community resource partner out there. And it was just, one of those like, well, how can we help this guy? Well, I don't want the help. It's like, hey, I know I don't want to exist anymore. I just want to be in the hole and suffer. So send me to a hole and suffer. I want to go to jail. What I'm seeking for is peace. I know I caused a lot of pain to my family and some other people out there, especially after, I held up people at gunpoint. But nonetheless, I just want peace. So he decides to not be, he struggled with reintegrating, but so his piece was going back into some kind of institutionalized organization, which was prison for 10, 15 years, I believe, so that he can get that piece that he was looking for and actually fit in, be a contributing member of a organization, a society. And he's thriving in jail. Go figure, right? But nonetheless, this is one of the guys that, he was underserved. So this other one, Mr. Ed Velasquez. Now, I'm going to try really hard to be professional as I present this, but nonetheless, Ed is a kid that I knew, man, since he was born. He was actually born a month before I joined active duty. And so throughout his family and or throughout his life, we stayed in touch with one another. He actually lived next door to me. Great, great, great kid growing up, very funny, very enthusiastic, and a go-getter, but he grew up in a similar environment that I grew up in, such as being abusive or an abusive home, alcoholism. I mean, you name it, everything and anything that happens within, close families that have, migrated over to the US or whatnot. But nonetheless, I don't know the specifics about that, but he called me several times. He's like, hey, should I join the military or not? He was actually starting to transition from high school and what do I want to do when I grow up type thing, right? And so he didn't have enough money for college. He took some college classes, was successful in some of the classes he was taking, but he joined the National Guard. There were no deployments, only training or sessions, for about 3 years prior to his death. And then, out of an anger outrage at the very, very, very beginning of COVID, which we can't even blame COVID for this, he, commits suicide. So he ends up taking a shotgun to his head, and you can imagine the cleanup job. I can because I was the one who got to clean all the biohazard. So I felt not necessarily responsible. I remember telling him, like, hey, you grew up in an abusive environment. You need to get out. Get out, leave home, go seek something else, something greater for you. But yet he had all these same labels as well. Ed was my cousin. And man, it breaks my heart that our family had to endure this. If you guys can only hear the scream of his mom when she first saw him at the funeral home, man, it was just gut wrenching feeling that just carried for miles, all because someone did not reach out to him or because he met a statistic or a goal in someone's program, and yet the outcome was still the same. So some of the labels that are there for the variants is like, hey, this guy is challenging. He's problematic. There's been some domestic violence in there, chemical dependency. He's an expert at failure, expert at failed relationships. Homeless, afraid, angry, suicidal since a child, justice evolved veteran, blah blah blah. Yeah, absolutely. I've had all those labels. The guy on the far left with the sunglasses, that's me. That was me on my first deployment. I was actually transitioning from, we had transitioning commands from my first deployment into the other command that was taking over our mission while we were supposed to be gone back on leave for 30 days. Nonetheless, I'm going to read to you why suicide becomes an option. During my healing process, I went to the Boston Red Sox Foundation, and they work out there with WWP as well. And as we're going through, there's a team or there's a group of mothers, about 35, 40 moms, or not moms, there's actually parents out there, gold star parents. And these are parents that are all of them were there because they're experiencing hardship understanding why their son or daughter committed suicide. So they wanted to know, is like, Omar, why does suicide become an option? And man, I struggled for the 2 weeks that I was there. Probably about 2 days before I left, I got the courage enough to be able to jot down some thoughts as to what goes through a person's head, not only based on my own experience, but based on my experience from dealing with other veterans who had committed suicide. So, suicide often becomes an option when a person loses all hope for the future and cannot see beyond their current circumstances or perceives their situation as worsening. The faith they once had health held the faith they once held diminishes as they encounter continuous disappointment or failure along their path. So fear and anxiety build up, leading to a state beyond the emotional threshold where anger rises from the inability to gain any sense of control, including self control. So, despite of outward smiles and social interactions, the individual may still feel empty, alone, and sad. Emotional experiences fluctuate, causing a loss of appreciation for the blessings in life. Feelings of loneliness are subjective, yet very real, even though we're surrounded by billions daily. They're not intimate, not necessarily sexual relationships, but some of those relationships do deviate the loneliness that may be absent otherwise. So one might have thousands of social media connections, but lack deeply rooted relationships. There's certain triggers, such as holidays or anniversaries, that can intensify the pain and potentially lead to a manic depressive episode. Well, sometimes suicidal individuals push others away through overbearing and irritable behavior, which only serves to validate their sense of isolation. The pain experience is often both emotional and physical. The body doesn't really discriminate between these resources or the sources of the pain. It just simply registers it. It acknowledges that pain is pain. Poor physiological health or an injury can create a vicious cycle of emotional and physical pain, depression, which becomes a vicious cycle, right? And so the emotional pain may stem from a traumatic experience in childhood or adulthood, including those unresolved feelings of self forgiveness or forgiveness towards others. Now, socioeconomic status does not discriminate. Wealth, status, education does not necessarily prevent suicidal thoughts when these external factors fail to fulfill the basic human need for belonging. The suicides of public figures like Robin Williams highlights this as successful individuals still struggle with depression. Some of these individuals turn to drugs to temporarily ease their pain, but this can only cause chemical imbalances and lead to addictions, which which may accumulate into overdose. While slogan, hotlines, and strangers may offer help, many struggle individuals do not know how to ask for help or even recognize that they're in need for it. Shame, ignorance, and fear of stigma create barriers to reaching out. Even professional interventions lack true intimacy. They are often perceived as a transactional interaction performed by a compensated individual, such as a therapist, right, or a psychiatrist. So, regarding loved ones, some are too absorbed in their own struggles to recognize the pain or suicidal tendencies of those close to them that are suffering. Signs are often noticed only after the tragedy has happened, after the fact. Loved ones may then unjustly label the deceased as being selfish, failing to recognize that suicide stems from illness, not being self centered. This illness mainly manifests through behaviors rather than through physical symptoms, although self-harm can be sometimes be visible within the actual veteran. So the medical field permits euthanasia for untreatable illnesses, entrusting life-ending decisions to professionals. Despite of treatments for depression, there is no definite cure. Managing mental illness is pretty much a lifelong practice. Suicidal individuals face an internal battle and challenge the building of trust with new caregivers. The phrase suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem overlooks the reality that depression is often chronic condition, meaning it's not temporary, it's long term. The struggle is lifelong, and the desire to end life arises from a search of lasting peace. In conclusion, kindness, compassion, and vigilance are essential. Recognizing these signs and investing time in our loved ones despite our busy schedules can make a crucial difference within a person suffering with this. So, this was, like I said, something that I shared with these gold star parents. There are some areas here that we could have been preventative or proactive while they were in the military or transitioning out of the military. And now we as the community, we have the responsibility to be reactive during their hardship or even through some of the moments of destruction. The idea here is to quit being reactive, but become proactive. And then through a continuous loop of improvement, we start becoming predictive. So the consistency, continuous loop of improvement is the act, plan, do, check, act, right? And the person who's in the middle is the actual person experiencing that transition. So with my nonprofit, we looked at commitment versus compliance. I never got a grant. I never asked for a grant. Why? Because I didn't want to be held down accountable for meeting the grant. My goal was to help out these veterans. It was their quality of life. So what I was doing was empowering and preparing them to transition and reach their desired goal. And out of any period in time they did not feel comfortable and they go into the next step or the next phase, we would revisit that area, that continuous loop of improvement until they were ready to transition. This gave the actual veteran the ability for them to take a hold of their success, of their reaching their desired goal, not the metric. So, compliance and provider burnout, some of the studies that I read out there, which is actually a lot, was that there's too much work and not enough workers. So because of this, some of the studies were showing that, unfortunately, we have mental health professionals that were falsifying information to meet the metrics. The intake was over-reported to meet the criteria. The visits and consults documentation or copy and paste from her case files or from other visits within the same individual. And the reason behind it is because where employees were fearing losing their job due to low performance because the metric was based on that you meet the criteria, right? That you meet the numbers that we're looking for, not the quality. So in essence, even though these guys are licensed professionals, they committed fraud. This is fraud because this is a federal offense because you're dealing with federal funded money, right? So I fear that in the findings of all this research, this is becoming the norm. This has become the normal practice within the industry of mental health and social work. So my condolences to those, or not my compassion to those people that are in the mental health facilities, because I know firsthand, not only from sitting as a recipient, but also from seeing all this, right? So this is what it comes down to, right? Are you a leader? And the answer is yes. If you guys are here, you guys are leaders. You guys are influencing your community, you're influencing your family, you're influencing your coworkers. So you are a leader. So some of those qualities that are there is what it looks like. But the one that matters the most is the quality of a leader is measured by the quality of the people they serve or their followers. That's the very last bullet. And I think that is the very most important. So the quality of a leader is measured by the quality of the people they serve or their followers. You want to see how effective you are as a leader? Look behind you and look at the people that are following you or the people that you're serving. Is their quality reflecting your service? That's the answer that you have to ask yourself if you're truly an effective leader, not just a leader, right? So we understand that it takes a support system to reintegrate some of these veterans back into the community, right? So support system can be advocacy, can be policy, can be housing, can be paying their bills, um, helping repairing their cars, helping them obtain their documentation. I mean, you name it, there's a bunch of things that are involved, a support system. But the very most important thing of a support system to a veteran is you, you in the middle, you in the middle of the scene, what is out there. So what can be done? So what I'm looking for, what can be done to properly integrate these veterans, underserved veterans, within the prison system, right? We failed them once. They failed to transition from the military sector to the civilian sector. I don't want them to fail again as they transition from a convicted prison lifestyle into a convicted civilian sector, right? So they still have to reintegrate. They still served their country and said, hey, I will serve. I raise my right hand. So what I'm looking for is possibly metrics that are qualitative. I'm looking for strategic, proactive, and preventative measures, an approach to be able to reintegrate these veterans back in civilian life. And I'm looking for a group of volunteers, a work group initiative maybe, that we can help not only just volunteer our time in the prison, but advocate for these particular veterans and help them have a healthy transition after they are released from prison. So in conclusion, I want you guys to know that my motivation behind this is the parable of the servant's talents in S. and Matthew. And when I meet my creator, however I get there or whenever I get there, I want to be able to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. I trusted you with some and you multiply it. You didn't divide it. You didn't hide it. You didn't keep it to yourself, but instead you multiplied the blessings. So that is what I want to leave you guys with. Challenge your status quo. My references are listed here. Like I said, a lot of them, they all pretty much were saying the same stuff over and over again, especially the ones within the last 5 years. I've been doing this since 2006. So this is my motivation behind this presentation. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to Anthony. My phone number is 956-357-0693. Anthony can help you coordinate as to what type of training you may need to be able to gain access to the prison. It's a very quick, easy 20-minute training. You can do the same day as your visit, but we definitely need to have some kind of interaction as a group and be able to target and serve these underserved veterans. Thank you, and God bless.